During the summer of 2012, Colorado experienced record heat, drought, and a devastating wildfire season. In Larimer County, the High Park fire burned weeks before Election Day, consuming over 87,000 acres just west of the city of Fort Collins. In El Paso and Teller counties, the Waldo Canyon fire reached its peak on Election Day. It destroyed 300 houses and drove 32,000 people from their homes, mostly in the city of Colorado Springs. Despite the fires, the election went on. This video is a testament to those who made it happen. The right to vote, it's a right we have, it's a privilege we have as Americans. It's something we've cherished for well over 200 years. And you look at our efforts to make sure that people can vote, even in the face of tragedy, even in the face of adversity, because that is so important. It's what we are as Americans.
I think the right to vote is very, very important. It's important to me, and it's important to a lot of people.
As a citizen of the United States, we've fought long and hard to have the right to vote.
I would not miss an election and an opportunity to vote. I know voting is important to community members, and it's why I do what I do. It's why I'm involved in the election process at the clerk's office.
I feel that everyone needs to get out and cast their vote. And if you don't do so, then you really don't have anything to gripe about. Because if you want to make or affect change, then you need to get out and cast your vote.
It is a privilege and an honor that people have the ability to vote. And as far as being an election official and part of the election process, you take a lot of pride in being able to provide that to the people.
I exercise my right to vote. I encourage everybody else to, and I know sometimes you can't do that, but it's critical. And I've heard it said oftentimes, if you don't vote, you can't complain.
It's a privilege for us all to be able to vote, and it should be made available to everyone and anyone who is eligible to vote and wants to vote.
I think when you work in county government, you understand that elections is one of the most important functions of county government. And certainly everyone in El Paso County supports the notion that the election process is not about political parties and affiliations and ideologies. The process itself is about being 100% accurate, 100% timely, and 100% trustworthy.
Everyone in this office who's involved in the elections process cares very deeply about the right of every legal citizen to have that ability to cast a ballot.
You really see these things on television, you read about them in the paper, you really don't know what it's like, and then all of a sudden here it is in your backyard.
So there was always that unpredictability of what task you would have to jump into and complete next.
If the fire had come over the ridge, we were going to pack up our stuff and go to our fallback location.
So everybody was able to cast a ballot that chose to or drop off their ballot, but by 7:30 we had to evacuate the building.
By the time we shut down at 7 o'clock, you couldn't even see across the street. The smoke was so thick.
In many ways, this was the most tragic event I can remember in more than 53 years of living in Colorado Springs.
We have 346 houses that were just leveled to the ground.
With all the city officials and county officials, and everybody had this, not so good feeling about what was coming at us.
There were so many people involved, being represented across so many different agencies, and it was such a team effort.
We had people who've been on wildfires around the country watching this and here managing this fire and had never seen anything like this. It was, as our fire chief put it, of epic proportion.
We had literally hundreds of fire trucks and thousands of firefighters deployed, camped. At one night we had 700 firefighters that were camping out.
For the first time in our fire department's history of over 100 years, we had an all-call back for every sworn firefighter to mandatory show up and report to a fire station.
Well, the fire was huge. It covered most of Risk Canyon's response area, I think 89,000 acres at the end. Something like 259 residences lost. That doesn't count the thousands and thousands of garages, shops, barns, and other things that were lost.
Flame lengths were up in the hundreds of feet of some of these things, and you know, that in and of itself is quite spectacular to see from a distance, but when you're standing at the base of it, it definitely does put it in a different perspective.
I heard one of our reserve deputies tell me coming and going from this building one I think it would happen to be a weekend, but you know, part of our operational period, that he was as scared as he'd ever been working on this fire, and he's a 30-year-plus military veteran.
The interesting part for me was my husband was up here in this firefight, so I did get to hear probably more than I wanted to know as a spouse. I know a lot of other spouses, and you know, they didn't get to hear it firsthand. I was monitoring the radio. As soon as I heard him on, it was time to turn it off.
When the Hyde Park fire started, we were in the middle of a primary election. During that election, and evacuations occurred, houses were burning down. There's no question in my mind that there were some folks who the voting wasn't right on the top of their list, and they probably lost their ballots to a fire.
There were fires all over the state, the eastern plains, southwestern part, up near Estes Park, obviously the fire that I was dealing with in Teller County and El Paso County, and you know, the election officials really worked great together.
They always had a dedication to the process. Even if they did leave, they would stay as long as they could on site.
They still conducted the election. They were prepared to evacuate and were willing to stand, you know, within a half mile of the evacuation zone.
We were able to smell the smoke, see the smoke coming over the hills, and also there would be the ash, the dust settling on the desk. You would pick up the phone and you could just feel it on the phone handle. Pencils you would pick up. Ash and dust was just coming into the office.
Our election judges that were working out in the front of our building were really starting to get quite anxious with that huge plume of smoke coming over, and the wind just started blowing, and our office started filling up with smoke. And you know, by this time, some of our election judges had evacuated. They had to leave the building to go take care of their own personal property that was in danger at that time. We were all trying to stay very calm, and our election workers are so dedicated. They all made the decision after the clerk spoke with them to go ahead and stay as long as we asked them to stay.
They're a stubborn sort. They cared so deeply about the election that most of them would not leave until 7 o'clock, and they stayed till the bitter end. And it's only as the evacuation order is coming across that we're finally able to push them out of the door and say, you need to leave, you need to go. That some of them were willing to do so.
We put out the information on our webpage. We put it out to the disaster recovery centers. We put it out to the press. And so folks who were involved in that fire, or in the community as a whole, knew how to get another ballot, knew where those centers were at, and knew that this office, if need be, would even have teams of bipartisan teams that would bring ballots to individual voters so that they would not lose the opportunity of voting.
We had contacted the Secretary of State and gotten permission to fax some ballots to a few voters who were unable to reach a site because they were isolated because of the fire.
We know that people weren't able to get up to Teller County, so we made arrangements to accept Teller County ballots for those residents who maybe were stuck here in El Paso County and couldn't get up the pass because of the fire. Teller County did the same for our county, for El Paso County residents. So we definitely were thinking about all the people out there that were under difficult situations and couldn't get to our office.
The result of that is that in our primary that was contested, we actually had 8% increase in turnout from the last primary. So not only was everyone able to vote, had voted in the past and wanted to, but we actually had an increase in the number of voters in the party with a contested primary here locally.
Throughout the fire, what I saw was people helping people, whether they were residents, firefighters from the area, or firefighters from outside the area, law enforcement, SWAT, neighbors and friends. Really a pretty incredible showing of people supporting people in very stressful and very dangerous situations.
Within the community, I know there have been garage sales where people can come and get free household items or free clothes for those people that were displaced or lost their homes.
We put a $6.50 price tag on a lunch, And I can't tell you the number of people that put $100 in the kitty and never asked for anything back.
One of our managers at the office suggested that we immediately begin a care and share food collection and monetary collections, and so our office began that immediately. We actually are the ones who initiated it for the whole building.
There were 2 horses very likely in the path of the fire. He returned from the evacuation zone to the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, where he picked up the Sheriff's Mounted Patrol horse trailer, returned to the evacuation zone, got those horses out safely.
We had several firemen and police officers physically had to carry some people from their residences just due to the fact that they just could not move very well and were not ambulatory.
We had people coming in the polling places, are you okay? Do you need anything? You know, how is your family? And as destructive and terrible as that fire was, I really think the community in Woodland Park and the surrounding areas, they're stronger because of what they've come through.
I can't help but be overwhelmed with pride to think about the teamwork that was shown and demonstrated. And so that is a positive that we can take away, that people could put aside what their respective agency might feel about something and simply come together as one unit to tackle this type of event, tackle this blaze. That's very, very important to take away, to say, hey, we came together and we did a good job, and I know that we're going to see that same type of team effort if we were to face something like this in the future.
When we knew that we had lost lives and we knew that we had lost properties, there was a grim resolve in Colorado Springs. And that resolve was, we're going to rebuild, we're going to get through this together, and when we're through, we'll be a closer and better community than we were before.
We can be there for one another. We can support one another throughout these things. And once it's done, it's really not done, it's just beginning. And we need to continue to support folks in need, and I see that happening in my community.
The citizens of Colorado were very, very resilient, and I want to thank each and every community and the populace for stepping forward to mitigate the fires that were taking place and to also minimize the damage that was done to each and every community.
Hope for a new beginning, hope for growth, hope for a sense of community and knowing that people care, not only in the community that they're directly in, but knowing people in the surrounding areas are praying for them, hoping, and supporting them.
So being able to see people come together and dig down deep inside and help one another, I think that's something we ought to celebrate at the end of the day, and the thing that we can take away from this real tragedy, that deep down inside, people are really good, and deep down inside, people are really willing to help one another out and help out their neighbor and their friends, and help people vote and help people run an election.